how do I create a life I love in the present moment? Because wealth can only be experienced in the present. We all have the ability to cultivate that. And it has nothing to do with money.
Welcome to the Legacy Branding Podcast. I'm your host, Laura Beauprelant, here to guide you through the journey of selling your business and building a personal brand that leaves a lasting impact. On the show, we'll explore real-life founder stories, expert insights, and actionable strategies to help you navigate the transition, avoid post-sale crisis, and create your impact-driven legacy brand. Whether you're thinking of selling, building to sell, or already on the other side, this podcast is your go-to resource for making your next evolution your best one yet. Let's dive in. Today on the Legacy Branding Podcast, I'm super excited to welcome Mike Brown. He's an entrepreneur, an investor, former Navy fighter pilot, and wealth coach. After founding and exiting an 8-figure oil and gas investment firm, Mike combined the tactical precision honed in the cockpit with real-world experience navigating the complex world of finance. Through his coaching program at Unbreakable Wealth, Mike helps entrepreneurs bridge the gap between wealth and freedom, redefining what it really means to build lasting financial security and live a life you love. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Laura. I'm honored to be here.
Amazing. I was actually telling my son earlier, because I know I've mentioned him to you. He wants to be a pilot and he's been interested in fighter planes. And I was like, hey, I'm talking to the guy who used to fly fighter jets on my podcast today. So he was very excited. I think I just scored some mom cool points in his eyes.
I love it. Happy to help.
So speaking of that, your career path has been fascinating, right? From flying fighter jets for the Navy to founding and exiting a very successful business and now running a wealth coaching business. How would you say this journey has helped you approach business, maybe the way you take risks and think about wealth today?
Well, it's certainly been a wild ride, and I feel like I've lived many lifetimes over the last decade or so. It's really been an evolution and an arc, and I would say that the fundamental piece is just being open to what emerges and that different paradigms and different focuses are appropriate at different stages. And so when I was getting out of the Navy, I was very much a type A military guy, burn the boats, like charge ahead. And through blood, sweat, and tears, through reaching the pinnacle of success, standing on the mountaintop and waking up and going, hey, maybe this isn't what I thought it was going to be. That definition really has evolved and shifted over time to how I feel about wealth now and what the kind of the fundamental of my program is, which is that essentially money is just a battery and we need to use that battery in service of creating a life that actually serves us and serves our values and allows us to step into meaning, purpose, and fulfillment. If we're looking at a number to feel like enough, the reality is that's always going to be an empty pursuit. But if we can transition to thinking about how do I create a life I love in the present moment, because wealth can only be experienced in the present. And the reality is we all have the ability to cultivate that at any given time, and it has nothing to do with money. So that's kind of the evolution. But I am grateful for the journey, and I had to go through those things. I had to go through that deep achievement builder phase in order to be able to step into this work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the struggle is essential, and we all go through it in different ways and shapes. And those journeys we go through get us to where we are today. And the next challenge will get us to the next thing after that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you touched on, I'm really grateful for the journey and even the tough parts, even the valleys along the way. I can look back now and what I tell people is, hey, like, I'm not grateful for the pain. I'm not grateful for the suffering that I went through, but I'm grateful for what it gave me. I'm grateful for the wisdom on the backside. And I think one thing that we tend to do is we know that gratitude is the answer, but we try to rush gratitude. We try to look for the lesson in the moment. And I think you have to sit in it, experience the pain, go through it. And then on the backside, you can look and go, okay, what did I learn there? And how do I integrate that?
Yeah. I've had many moments where I'm like, deep breath. I'm like, I know there will be a lesson in this. I know I will learn, like I will be better for this, but I can't see it right now.
Today is not that day.
Today is not that day. And probably tomorrow won't be, not even maybe next month. But I think if you go into life too, knowing like maybe this sucks right now. And this phrase I think about often is this too shall pass. Whether that's good times or bad times, you will move through them all. It is a reminder that even if today sucks or this experience, it won't last forever. It might last a long time, but there is a time where it will shift.
Yeah. And I think you made a critical point there is that the good times unfortunately will also pass, right? And that, to me, that's what becoming unbreakable is all about, is how do I cultivate multidimensional wealth, meaning health, spiritual, relational, energetic wealth, so that if I'm at the peak, I'm experiencing really good times right now, how do I know that a potential bad time may be on the horizon, and how do I pass through that with grace instead of suffering? And that's what building meaning and lasting wealth means to me now, is riding the peaks and the valleys of life. How do I make sure that I'm essentially inoculating myself against being devastated by the bad times?
And I love that you touched on wealth being more than money. I think people hear wealth and they only think money. And I think wealth is so multidimensional, as you mentioned, and wealth brings freedom, but without your health, you have wealth in your health, you have wealth in your finances, wealth in your relationships. It is so multifaceted. And without the wealth of all of those areas, you won't have the freedom to do what you want to do. And you talk a lot about bridging this gap between wealth and freedom. I'd love for you to chat a bit more about how you approach that.
Yes, if we're going to talk about wealth, just like you said, we have to define what that actually means. And money is the means, not the end, because money for money's sake doesn't actually do anything, right? It's a completely neutral concept. It's a store of value. When I think about wealth, I define it as freedom, like you said, in four areas: freedom of health, freedom of relationships, freedom of time, and freedom of mind. And those create an ascending order, with health being foundational, because one of my favorite quotes, a healthy man wishes for many things and a sick man only wishes for one, right? Like, that's the foundation of things. And then we move into relational wealth. And that means the freedom to spend the time with the people that I care about, choose who I do business with, choose who I surround myself with, right? I don't want to be beholden to anybody, and I can create that relational wealth within my life. And then freedom of time and freedom of mind. Freedom of time tends to be quite obvious, I think, to most entrepreneurs. We build a business, and then all of a sudden we realize we have a tiger by the tail and our time is taken away from us. And then we slowly dig out of this hole and start buying back our time via delegation, or as we build that scaling business. But then freedom of mind is the one that I think is most critical. And it's self-actualization and doing the personal development work, healing wounds, but it's also recognizing that all the money in the world doesn't matter if I'm laying in my bed staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m., stressed out, anxiety. So how do I really cultivate a life that results in that true freedom, where I can wake up every day and know that I'm stepping into purpose, and knowing that even if it's a bad day, my actions are aligned with my values and I'm truly creating the life that I want?
And I think that's so important to look at all of those areas. What do you think that entrepreneurs get wrong when they think about wealth and even their relationship with money? I know in the work that you do, you help people, the entrepreneurs you work with, really unpack their relationship with money. Is it limiting beliefs? Like, what do you find is the biggest challenge?
Yeah, so I'll take that question in two parts. The biggest problem I see is pleasure delaying or delayed gratification. Saying, okay, once I hit this number, or once I sell my company, then I'll finally make time for the things that are important. Then I'll take care of myself. Then I'll take care of my family. The reality is that's a completely broken model, because the data suggests, and there's a lot of evidence out there, that anytime we hit the goal, we do the thing that we think we're going to do, we just move the goalpost. Right. And so to get off this treadmill of always moving the goalpost, we have to realize, hey, I need to focus on cultivating wealth in the present moment. And again, that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with money. In fact, most of the entrepreneurs I work with, we do an exercise called the Unbreakable Year, where they design their ideal life. And then we look at that life and the life that they're currently living and identify those gaps. And most of them are free. Most of them are, hey, put my phone away at 6 p.m. and have dinner with my kids and spend time doing meaningful things. Like, you don't need more money to do those things, right? So most of the founders that I work with realize very quickly that everything that they want to create, for the most part, they're already at or within striking distance of having enough money, but they actually need to cultivate more of that time freedom, more of that freedom of mind. And so that's the place that we start. And then once we've kind of identified, okay, what's the life that I want to build? What are my values? What is my purpose? Like, what are we actually doing here? What am I doing this all for? Then we can start looking at the limiting beliefs and the self-sabotage and the things that get in our way of stepping into that power and living that ideal life. For any identified problem, there's two fixes. There's a mechanical fix, meaning we can build systems, and then there's an emotional fix. And both of them are really important in order to get where we want to go. So the relationship to money piece is typically unwinding this story that we tell ourselves of, I'll just be happy when, or I'll finally feel like enough when I hit X. And we look at how we grew up with money, what habits and what did you witness from your parents and their relationship to money, and where does that show up in your life. We look at how did you grow up with money? Were you rich in a poor town? Were you poor in a rich town? Like, what did that all look like? And how does that shape your identity and your values? And then just start really unwinding the things that aren't ours and choosing what we actually want to believe and upgrading and rewiring those beliefs for success.
Do you find that you mentioned the mechanical and the emotional? Do you find that most people have one versus the other, or do most people have both, or they're missing the systems and there's an emotional challenge that they're dealing with as well?
I think for founders and entrepreneurs, especially, we lean toward the systematic fix. We lean toward the mechanical fix. So, just taking an example from my own life, one of my big struggles for my entire career has been procrastination or aversion to admin, doing tasks I don't want to do, going to the post office, calling the insurance company, doing tax stuff, like filling out my bookkeeper's ask report. Like, all of that stuff is my kryptonite. So there's two options here. Number one, the mechanical fix. I can hire an assistant, I can delegate, I can systematize, and that takes it off my plate and it works for a while. But the reality is you can't avoid all admin work. There's no way to systematize your life enough to get out of this thing. So I still need to address the root issue and dive into, okay, where did this admin aversion come from? And so there's various modalities, doing parts work, therapy, doing coaching, and diving into where did this really form and what's actually happening below the surface. And I think both of those are actually really necessary. Like, I still want to delegate most of that work, but I don't want it to be my kryptonite when it comes up.
Right. And so is it still your kryptonite?
This has been a 10-year overnight success, but it's really been a focus of what needs to heal, what needs to come through me. And recently stepping into different modalities, and I've worked on this in different ways over the years, but really identifying that part of me that does want to get shit done, and realizing that if I want to achieve my dreams and step into my ultimate purpose and meaning in the 10x version of myself, like, I have to include and incorporate that part and celebrate that part that goes to the post office and does the menial tasks. And so it's been a really fun journey, just continually diving in. And this is the beautiful thing, right? Is the work is never done. Like, I've been aware of this. I've had the insight here. I've worked on it in various ways, and it just takes time, and it always shows up in new and more insidious ways. And so it's just an ever deepening process.
Yeah. Well, and it makes me think of the conversation we had before I hit record around you had been doing all these like extraordinary things earlier this year, and you realize that if everything you do is extraordinary, it starts to become ordinary. And maybe doing these things like going to the post office and these less than exciting things is also a really good balance to remind you of those things and activities that you do that are extraordinary.
Yeah, that's it, right? Like, there has to be a balance. There's a duality to all of these situations. In Q1, I completely overscheduled. I over-indexed for fun. I went backcountry snowboarding twice. I went to the Kelly Slater Surf Ranch. I did a week in the BVIs. Like, I did all of these amazing trips. And on the way home, like on the backside of that, I found myself just almost guiltily like wishing for spreadsheets and Zoom calls, because yes, all of those experiences were amazing and peak experiences. And if you stack too many in the same short amount of time, they lose their luster, they lose their peak. We normalize really quickly. Bill Burr has a great comedy about internet on airplanes. Like, the first day we had internet on airplanes, everyone was like, wow, isn't this amazing? And then the internet went out and they're like, what the hell? Where's my internet? Right? And we normalize our lifestyle so quickly that we need that space between. We need the concept of what the Japanese call ma, which is the space between notes, right? And there is a lot of profundity and joy to be found in the mundane, in the daily life. Here's the beauty, is that we get to bounce back and forth and correct. And there are obviously, just like we talked about with periods of really good times and periods of bad times, like both of those get to be true. And we just get to kind of bounce between the two and figure out what works.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just got back a couple of weeks ago from a trip to Papua New Guinea, and it was amazing to really just disconnect. Like, I didn't have internet. I really purposefully, when I do an adventure trip like this, try to not be connected deeply online or even with things happening at home, just so I can really fully immerse myself in the experience. And we spent a couple of days living with the tribe in this remote region of Papua New Guinea, which sounds crazy to just even say out loud that I did that. But it was amazing to just exist in the day to day with this tribe. People who, there was a couple of solar panels on roofs that would, for lights. That was it. There was no power. There was no running water. And just experiencing the flow and the ease and maybe even the mundanity of the day. We were playing with the kids and going for a swim and walking around their village and connecting. And it was such a beautiful gift to just really slow down and look around at what they have, which compared to what we have is very little of like physical, tangible things. And just to see how do they spend their time and to just really sit in that kind of mundanity in a way, despite the fact that I'm in this far-flung place having this wild adventure, there was a bit of that peace that really came from that experience.
Yeah, my dear friend Kevin Dahlstrom says that everything you own owns a piece of you. And I think there's a lot of truth in that, right? Is that the more stuff that we have and the more pressure that we put on ourselves to achieve, like we're giving away little parts of ourselves. And so going to get really quiet in nature or finding that simplicity, I think is a really important part of creating that multidimensional wealth, that well-roundedness. And whether that's just taking a silent retreat by yourself for a couple of days every quarter or whatever that practice looks like of, detaching from the hustle and the intensity of building. And by the way, all of that stuff is really, really important, but we need that contrast in order to recharge and really focus on what's important. And then that actually fuels us. It fuels our growth. It allows us to build more and achieve more if we're grounded into that simplicity.
Hey founders, quick shameless plug for the sponsor of this podcast and my company, Lab Creative, where we help ambitious founders untangle their personal brand from their business so they can position the company to sell and build a personal brand for their next evolution. If that sounds like you, head to labcreative.ca to check out our work and to book a call with me. Or if you want to just dip your toe in first, grab a copy of the Founders Brand Playbook. It's our free step-by-step guide to building a brand that attracts premium buyers and creates opportunities for you post-sale. You can download it at labcreative.ca/playbook. So I talk with a lot of founders on this podcast who have exited their business, what that experience was like, and would just love to chat a little bit about you. Obviously, you've exited a career with the Navy, then you exited a business. Now you're running your coaching business. What was that experience like of exiting your business, and what lessons were in that for you?
That story this could be a 3-hour.
Is that a loaded question? Okay.
But fundamentally, as I touched on before, like I'm standing on the peak of the mountain. I've done the thing that I was supposed to do, right? I went to combat and tested myself. I worked hard and got good grades in school. I built this investment firm. I've got the house and the money and the cars. And I woke up and realized like, this isn't it. This didn't fill the hole that I thought it was going to fill. It didn't wake up any different. And, essentially had this moment of panic of like, oh no, I did what society told me would make me happy. And yet here I am. And what a beautiful gift to be in that spot and go, okay, now what? Like this didn't work, and really get to start unwinding. And so many post-exit founders go through some sort of existential crisis, whether it be answering the question of who am I without my company? Who am I? What is my value if nobody needs me every day? What is my value if I'm not building anything in the world right now? And a couple of things happen. Number one is we either get really uncomfortable and rush into what's next, because here's the thing that happens when you exit. Everyone goes, oh my God, congratulations. I can't wait to see what you do next. And I was like, like next, like that was really hard. Like, but there's a tremendous amount of pressure to keep biggering and biggering and build something even bigger on the backside. And so one of the first questions I sat with was, what if that's the most successful thing that I ever do in my life? What would that mean about me? And at first that was terrifying, but then over time, all of a sudden there started to be a satisfaction that grew out of that, of like, oh, I've done it. Like I can live the rest of my life and I don't have to achieve anything else to be worthy. And so that was really important for me to then start stepping into what's next. And by the way, I just like for any post-exit founders or founders out there that are considering an exit, I implore you, give yourself a gift of space, because so many of us on this planet work our whole lives tirelessly. And then we finally retire. And all of a sudden we're too sick, we're too broken, we're too old to really enjoy the fruits of our labor. Getting the gift of space while you're young enough to enjoy it, while you still have energy left, while you still have this boundless opportunity laying in front of you is a gift. It's such a gift to take that space. It will probably be uncomfortable, especially if you're an achievement oriented problem solving founder. And what's really interesting is starting to ask the question of like, what is this busyness been protecting me from? What is it that I don't want to feel? What have I been covering up? And allowing those questions to come to the surface. And that's where the real magic happens.
Yeah, I think this is why whenever we've had conversations, we're so aligned, because this is exactly the work that we do. And really that question about the existential crisis and the what's next and who are you without your business, that identity crisis, and not necessarily knowing what it is, not jumping right in. These are absolutely the kinds of conversations that I'm having both on this podcast, but also with clients. I always often say you don't have to know what you're doing, but it's more about why. What's the impact you want to create? And that could come in many ways, many shapes and forms.
Yeah. And giving yourself the space to really, there's a word that I use a lot in my work is emerge, right? Like what wants to emerge from you? And nothing can emerge if you're covering your feelings, if you're covering everything up with busyness, right? Like you have to actually create stillness for something to emerge and come through. And so some really important steps are, number one, try stuff on, because as founders, the thing that makes us successful, right? We have this burn the boats mentality. All right, I'm going to start this thing and I'm going to make it successful at all costs. Well, as you go into that post exit, you've already done it once. You've already built a successful business. And like now maybe burning the boats is not the answer. Is, hey, I'm going to try this new thing on. I'm going to see if I actually like it. I'm going to see if it really serves me. And then I'm going to give myself the permission to let it go if it doesn't. And really give yourself the opportunity to stand in your truth and go, hey, this isn't what I thought it would be. I thought I wanted to build another company, but I actually don't. And that freedom is where that emergence starts to take place of what really works. And it took me 5 years. Like I sold my company in 2019, and it was like, that's where I really think my journey begins. I exited a marriage and I exited my company at the same time, which is quite common.
Yeah.
And then I started to step into coaching. I had already been coaching founders that I was investing in and knew this was something that I wanted to do. The reality is I got scared. I got scared of who I would have to become. I got scared of what it would really mean to be a great coach and put that flag out there in the world. And so I told myself a story that I needed more success. I needed to do something else before I was really qualified to be a coach. So I went out and I bought a distressed e-commerce business. And I had this beautiful plan, this story that if I just cleaned up the balance sheet, eliminated the debt, I could turn it around and sell it for 3 to 5 times what I paid for it in 12 to 18 months. And it was an utter disaster. The wheels fell off shortly after we closed. I was losing $100,000 a month. And 2 years after my exit, I was more stressed out than I'd ever been. I was working harder than I'd ever worked. And I'm going like, how the hell did I get here? I made a life-changing amount of money where I never should have had to work again. And here I am. There's some days I don't want to get out of bed and face the day. And that happens. Now, since then, having talked to hundreds, if not thousands of post-exit founders, like this is a really common story as we rush into something and then our life falls apart and we go, what the hell? Like I didn't even get a chance to breathe. And again, I'm not grateful for that pain. That was a really, really tough time. But on the backside of that, what I got to create with the wisdom that I earned through that really tough time, now I've built this coaching business in a way that is really reflective of who I am. I'm doing exactly what I want to do. I'm leaping out of bed to work. I'm writing, I'm speaking, I'm creating, I'm coaching. And I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do that without all of that pain. Right. So that I'm grateful for the journey, not grateful for the suffering. As I like to say, I love learning the hard way, but I'm trying to quit.
Yeah, that's a good line. Absolutely. And I wonder, I feel like this is something, this idea of trying things on and being okay to say, this isn't right. When you think about my kids are in high school, my oldest is 17. And it's amazing when in school, they're like, okay, well, what are you going to go to university for? What are you going to study? And it's like, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? And it's like, what kid at 16, 17 knows? And then you kind of feel like, well, I'm committing to something. I'm going to go to school for X, Y, and Z. But what if you get there and you're like, ooh, okay, I liked the idea of it, but this actually isn't for me. I wonder how many kids actually stop, or if they just continue through and they do their 3 or 4 years of college or university, and then they get into a career that they're like, I don't really like this, but I committed to it back in the day. And then we wonder why, as adults, we struggle with this idea of just trying things on to see what we like and being okay with maybe this isn't the thing that I thought I wanted.
Yeah, we over-index for this idea of like never quit, never give up, because quitting is a superpower, right? And we do young people a tremendous disservice in this country by saying things like follow your dreams and pursue your passion. You'll never work a day in your life. Like that's not true. I am following my dreams and pursuing my passion right now. I love what I do with all of my heart. And there are days it still feels like work. So, and here I am living in this totally aligned place, creating exactly what I want to create. So how the hell is a 20-year-old supposed to go find their passion? So what I tell young people is like, hey, just like what you said, go build skills. Go find, like, I wasn't passionate about building an oil and gas investment firm. I was passionate about doing deals. I was passionate about sharpening my skills and learning the art of deal making. And there are always things you can be passionate about while you go and learn and then figure out what you really want to do. Because if you'd have told me at 25 that I was going to be a coach and this is the life that I would be living, I would have laughed you out of the room because I had no context. I didn't even have the understanding that this would be a passion, right? So to tell someone to follow their passion when they're 20 is, I think, just is really short-sighted.
Yeah. And passions change too, right? Who you are at 20. I mean, I'm an evolution of who I was at 20, but what I desired of my life today is different from what I wanted then. And you're barely even getting to know yourself in many ways.
Totally. Well, and the other thing is like we put all of this pressure, like you said, what do I want to do for the rest of my life? What legacy do I want to leave? To me, legacy is what happens after you're dead. What I want to do is I want to create impact. That's in the present moment. And right now, my impact is writing, speaking, and coaching. And I reserve the right to change my mind on that. Like that's where my energy is going right now. And my impact might be generated by some other, like maybe I want to run a hedge fund someday. Maybe I do want to take another 5 years off at some point. Like I reserve the right to do all those things. And I'm just focused on what lights me up today and how can I generate impact. And I think the closer we can stay to that focus on the present moment of, I don't need to figure out what I want to be when I grow up or what I want to do for the rest of my life. Like that's so heavy. Let me just figure out what I want to do right now. And I'm going to keep doing it until it doesn't light me up anymore. And then I'm going to change.
Yeah. That permission or that freedom. There's that word freedom again, the freedom to change your mind.
One of my favorite quotes is from Alan Watts. He said, I am under no obligation to be the same person I was 5 minutes ago.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. So this podcast is all about legacy. And I feel like that I was going to lead into that question next about what legacy is to you. But really, it sounds like you are not controlling your legacy, but you're controlling your impact. You're focusing on the impact you want to have today.
Yeah. Like how can I wake up every day? So I think that getting really clear on what it is you value. So understanding your core values and then again, like what is my purpose on this earth? Well, my purpose on this earth could change many times over my life. So what is my purpose right now? How do I best serve the values in the life that I want to create? And that creates so much more spaciousness than this idea of I'll do this thing for the rest of my life. And the same thing goes with legacy is like we focus so much on anytime I hear a founder who's working 100-hour weeks trying to build this empire to pass on to their kids and they say, I'm doing it for my kids. I go, have you asked them? Because if you asked your kids, I bet they'd rather you just be home for dinner and be there for them and go to their soccer game than build this crazy $100 million empire that you're going to pass along to them thinking like that's going to be the thing that they want. Like, let's slow down and go, what are we actually doing this for? And again, if you're focused on building a legacy, leaving something behind after you die, like make sure that's what those people want.
Yeah. And you're building it while you're here. And so it's thinking about, like if you think forward, what would you want your kid maybe to say about you when you're not there? And I remember having this interesting conversation at a dinner party, and we were talking about our parents or grandparents and the fascinating stories that we were telling about these people. And it wasn't the following the rules and doing all the things. It was those moments we spent together or these amazing things that they did that you were excited to share. And I think it is thinking about who are you today that is how you want them to carry you forward with them.
Yeah. I mean, I just imagine, right? If my kids 50 years down the road or tell me what was cool about your dad or what was significant about your dad, and they said, he left me a great inheritance. Like I have failed miserably at my life if that's all they can muster to say about me. And so if I can live my life with that lens, then I'm hopefully on the right path.
I love that. That's a great note to wrap this up on. So I'm like, Couldn't have said it better myself. How can people learn about working with you, Mike? What's the best way for them to reach out or connect with you?
Yeah, so follow me on Instagram. I love to connect with followers there at mbrown.co. I write a long form newsletter every week at unbreakablewealth.com/newsletter. It's a decade plus of in the trenches, investment insights, all the way to what makes a great life. And I pour a lot into that. So those are the two best places to check it out. And then my coaching community, Unbreakable Wealth, is a place for founders to have conversations about money and what makes a great life that you can't have anywhere else. So we definitely love to have you there.
Amazing. We'll make sure to add all of those in the show notes so people can reach out and connect. Thanks again for being here, Mike.
Thanks, Laura.
Thanks for tuning into the Legacy Branding Podcast. I hope today's episode has inspired and empowered you on your journey to building a brand that truly matters. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with other founders who you think would benefit from listening. And if you're ready to take the next step in building your legacy brand, visit our website, labcreative.ca, to learn more and book a call. Don't forget to join us next time for more conversations that will help you navigate your transition and create your legacy. Until then, I'm Laura Beauparlant.